It's something you keep seeing in movies that no one actually does in real life and annoys you every time. Story 1. Not a small thing, but a character who lives in a house or apartment way beyond their means. For example, a restaurant server living alone in a large apartment with a view in a major city. Come on. Story 2. Cook up a whole fry-up for breakfast on a school and work morning, and everyone just eats a few bites and they all leave everything sitting on the table for the entire day. Story 3. I start, the driver looking at the passenger for much more than 3 seconds, barely looking at the road, wanna die, not properly saying goodbye when talking on the phone. I'm gonna meet you there at 9 p.m. Hangs up. No bye, no talk later, where are the manners? Story 4. When you're watching a medical drama and the doctor draws the blood, walks it to the lab themselves and then proceeds to perform the testing alone in the lab that is dark and quiet. Story 5. Women in any fight action scenes tossing their long, luscious, perfectly styled hair about. That is annoying even just walking to work or sitting on the sofa, let alone having it fly around your face and obscuring your vision in the middle of a battle. I realize movies sell better when women look attractive, but it's so unrealistic. The best example I ever saw of it done right was Birds of Prey, when Canary, mid-kicking, swats her dreads out of her face while yelling in frustration, shouts for a hair tie off one of the other women, and continues kicking while quickly putting her hair up. That's all it takes. Story 6. The slightest tap on the head knocks someone fully unconscious, then they wake up with no concussion or side effects. Also, women can't run without falling down, and once they do they just stay there or crawl around. Story 7. Our heroine is being chased by a murderer. She hides behind a corner, and when he rounds the corner, she hits him with a chair. He goes down, unconscious. He's dropped his gun, so the heroine starts running again. How about A. Take the gun. B. Tie him up. C. Take his shoes and then run away. D. Anything except just running away again without actually doing anything to help yourself. Story 8. All the men are wearing long pants and warm clothes, and our heroine is in a tight singlet with as much skin and heaving cleavage as possible on display. She never once says it's cold, or ever fights crime fully dressed. CSI shows have placed unrealistic expectations on law enforcement. Can't just say enhance to the computer to make a blurry photo clear. Story 9. This isn't exactly what OP meant, but especially in older movies, like The Electric Horseman, Jane Fonda can sleep out in the desert for a week and still look like she just stepped out of the beauty salon. Story 10. Every single time someone who's even a little bit nervous walks up to a microphone, they get an awkward squeal of feedback. I've never seen this happen in real life. Story 11. Using a defibrillator on someone who is flatlining. Modern defibs wouldn't even charge up if they don't detect a pulse. They do not start stopped hearts. They cause a heart that is currently in fibrillation to no longer be or defibrillate. Story 12. Eating at a restaurant, then just opening your wallet, pulling out a bunch of bill, then tossing them onto the table and leaving without even asking for the bill. Story 13. A group of experts explaining something to other people in a criminal hunt, with each one saying one sentence, completing each other's thoughts, as if everyone is always in full harmony within the team and everyone needs a turn. Story 14. Finding an empty parking spot right in front of where they are going, getting up in the morning, getting dressed and going right out and not stopping to pee or anything. Story 15. There is a major issue, so the people involved all attend a meeting. The problem is explained in a calm, rational way. People then make relevant comments, a few minor disagreements, then everyone decides on a course of action. They leave to implement the plan. IRL, it would be a vague idea of the issue, people straying off on unrelated tangents. No solution is agreed upon. Another meeting is scheduled for next week. People leave and start backstabbing others about their dumb ideas. Story 16. Thinking you hear a noise days after several friends have been murdered in brutal circumstances, then walking down into the cellar half undressed with a candle-powered torch and saying hello, call the police and get the out of the house, when 2 cars are racing and the hero is ahead and pulling away. But for some reason the bad guy has suddenly caught up and is right beside our hero, though the hero makes a dramatic gear shift, which somehow makes his car go faster again. Did he upshift, downshift? Did he know his car had this extra whatever the whole time but just wanted to let the bad guy catch up? Story 17. Slightly different, but I hate it when movies show an eagle but they play a red-tail hawk sound instead because it sounds better than what eagles actually sound like. Story 18. At least for the US military, calling female superiors sir, you would be crushed for calling them a sir. They've been putting up with a male-dominated existence for probably 20 years. They would want to be respected and called ma'am properly. Story 19. When an IT guy enhances or zooms in on a fuzzy far away photo of someone, and then you can see the person in the photo as clear as day. Story 20. Movies set in a post-apocalyptic world where the ladies still manage to shape their eyebrows, women screaming whilst giving birth. You cannot scream and bear down simultaneously. When a fugitive cuts their own hair in a motel room with office scissors and it looks fabulous in the subsequent scenes, a decent pixie crop is tough. Story 21. One that has always been weird to me is when they show people playing a video game and the controller doesn't match the console, or the game shown on the TV isn't real. Like it's actually harder to mismatch this. Why go through extra effort to make it wrong? Story 22. People playing poker and non-stop breaking rules. Someone bets, someone else says he'll call that bet and raise you. You are not allowed to call and then raise. Call means you call, not raise. You can fold or call or raise. Choose one. Calling and then raising would be a string bet. you would be made to call and not allowed to raise. Similar with discussing the action with other players still left to act, you are not allowed to say to someone that has bet I know you are bluffing because, when there are others yet to act after you, the problem here is that anyone that has played poker would know that this is BS, kinda ruins the scene for them. Story 23 When people have a bad dream and they bolt upright in bed, I have had some crappy nightmares and I wake up like I usually do by just opening my eyes lying done. Story 24 Time travel movies that don't account for or explain for the fact that planet Earth is not where it was even 1 minute into the future or past. In order to successfully time travel, you have to precisely calculate the exact position of Earth in space, travel likely millions of miles in the blink of an eye and land precisely on an object traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. Story 25 A cop has just come out of a fast food restaurant and has a takeout bag of food. Then a voice on the radio says there is a 10 to 19 in progress in Maine and Elm, so the cop says we're on it, and then just throws their lunch into the garbage can and rush to their car. Or they are at their desk just about to bite into a hamburger when their partner comes in and says we got a tip on the murder, let's roll, so they toss the burger into the trash. This one happens on NCIS a lot. Story 26 Escape from quicksand. Growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, I was sure I would face some kind of quicksand peril in my adult life at some point. 0 encounters with quicksand, and I am 54 years old. 0 encounters with AROUS as well. I don't think either exists. Story 27 Leaving a string of unconscious bad guys. Unless severely brain damaged, they are waking up real soon. You need to restrain and silence them or kill them. They are not staying asleep for the next 15 minutes. Story 28 I'll have a beer at a bar. I realize they don't want to promote specific brands, but it makes me laugh thinking about what my local bartenders would say if I walked in one day and said I'll have a beer like a no, this is a brewery, which one? Story 29 When someone pauses in a sentence at the spot where it's implied they'd normally address somebody, inviting them to fill in their name. It's been a pleasure talking to you, miss, and that person always picks up on the cue and introduces themselves. It's an exchange that I've only ever seen in fiction, and it's such an awkward way of asking someone their name that I can't imagine it ever happening in real life. If it happened to me, I'd just think they were done talking, not assume they wanted me to respond. Story 30 Starting in 4, drawing blood, etc. by sticking the needle straight down into the arm. Also, sticking a needle straight into someone's neck, etc. Injecting a drug and they immediately drop to the ground. Drives me nuts. Story 31 Main character is being chased and running through a restaurant's kitchen without any of the staff reacting in the slightest. Like it's just a normal thing that happens in busy kitchens. Story 32 When parents are disappointed in their children and invoke the last name shame. You're a tailor, I expect better. My parents never used our last name in a dressing down. Story 33 The police are interviewing someone and the interviewee says something interesting to the police, so they shut down the interview and take off to pursue one lead. In reality they'd probably continue at length and ask the same questions multiple times to glean every little shred of information they could. Story 34 The classic sound of a movie car breakdown. The chugga-chugga clink-clunk sound every car makes as it dies in movies. I have never heard a car make that sound and I have had a bunch of shitty cars. Story 35 Fighting scenes. All of them. They are just long drawn-out choreographed dance scenes with awful camera angles and quick cuts. No one has fights like in the movies. Story 36 How they romanticize drinking as if it's like water, and then you see them getting up the next day as if they never had a sip of alcohol in their life. LMAO. Story 37 Two oddly connected things. The first is a guy shaving that then wipes off a crapload of foam with a towel. The second is anything post-apocalyptic where women have freshly shaved legs and pits. Story 38 A few when a character walks down the middle of a street instead of on the sidewalk. No one does that ever. Not sure if directors just think it looks cool on film, but I hate it every time. When a character has a gun on an unarmed person and keeps walking closer until the other person can knock the gun out of their hand. Why would anyone do that? Get really drunk and then 10 minutes later, they are functioning normally and fighting a bad guy with no impairments, or the drunk person drinks some coffee and they're magically fine. Story 39 Women with their perfectly done hair never putting it up while doing the most action-physically intensive things and somehow it never gets caught in their lip gloss or their face overall, and they're also wearing 3 heeled boots, a leather jacket, a tank top and skinny jeans. Story 40 Every shop in every movie is always welding or grinding something so that sparks are flying. The sound effect never matches the tool. Cutting torches. Grinder sounds, grinder, sounds like a torch. Makes no sense. I often wonder if it's done intentionally with how often I see it. Story 41 Anytime someone wants to take a necklace pendant metal from someone they always grab it and it hard in order to break the chain or strap instead of just lifting it over the person's head or even using the clasp. This means that the chain or strap is now broken and useless, so they'll either have to get a replacement or put the pendant locketjewel in their bag or pocket. The only excuses for this could be time constraints, or if the person wearing the necklace is hostile and speed is of the essence. Otherwise it's just a needless gesture which results in inconvenience at best, or the destruction of a priceless and irreplaceable important historical item at worst. I rewatched Underworld this past weekend for the first time since I saw it on release at the cinema, and Bill Nighy's character does this. It's so annoying. Story 42 There is a meeting of any kind, in settings like a doctor's office, a courtroom trial, a detective's office, in a Navy admiral's office. No lights are turned on, at all, the meeting or hearing is taking place illuminated only by dim sunlight through some sort of Venetian blinds, the lines going across everyone's face and the room. The Admiral in this case is played by Ed Harris in Top Gun Maverick. I hate seeing this artsy-fartsy. I have been in many of these situations myself, and they are all lit up like it's high noon outside. Story 43 on soap operas. When a main character had a baby, it aged normally for the first year, then, every Christmas when the family would gather to sing carols on a Christmas episode, the child would age about 5 years. 5 years later, that child that should be in pre-K was a troubled teen, heading off to college, and having an affair with her parents' best friend. Story 44. There are a couple of things that got old fast for me that seem to be a frequent occurrence. People walking away from an explosion and towering flames behind them in slow motion while wearing their toughest a bad face, and, though it wouldn't apply to real life, all superheroes continuing to land in the exact same pose from above as everyone else, one knee down, one fist to the ground. Story 45. Every guy in every shower in a movie is leaning against a wall for dramatic effect. Their wiener is always behind a forward-leaning leg. Who showers like that? Story 46. When people have a film or show then just roll over and go sleep or jump up and put their clothes on with no cleanup, like you're gonna have dribbling down your leg when you get to work. Story 47. A washed-up detective or private eye rolls out of bed to light up a cigarette and swig the remnant beer from the night before, and it shows their washboard abs and chiseled physique. Story 48. When a group orders Asian takeout and they eat directly out of the cartons, with chopsticks, it's so unsanitary and also makes no sense, like you just eat rice out of the cartons for 5 minutes. Then you're like, let me have some kung pao, here let's trade, it's such a common gross trope and will give you norovirus, edit a typo. Story 49. Getting into the shower, then turning on the water. Actual humans run the shower a minute until the water gets warm. To the waiter, gimme a sandwich beer drink. Story 50. Consistently having fresh, clean haircuts and neatly trimmed facial hair every day. This is the case especially with cop dramas, Law Order, etc. The entire force is always so well groomed. Anyone familiar with real-life cops knows this is never the case. Story 51. Ordering alcoholic drinks, taking a couple sips then leaving. Girl, if you don't sit the down with your 15 cocktail. I recently rewatched In the City and that's 90 of the show. No one owns any stuff in TV shows and movies. There are no doom piles or junk drawers or rooms closets where stuff goes to be ignored. Nothing ever looks lived in, but it will look quirky or fun to show the character's personality, but never like someone has lived there long term. Story 52. Empty coffee cups like the takeout ones with lids. It's so obvious when they empty by the way the actors handle them, and it drives me bonkers, like just put water in it or something. Story 53. Helicopter swooping. Drives me nuts. People in a helicopter are hunting someone or something that is unarmed on the ground, and the pilot makes these long swooping passes over the target rather than just hovering over it and shooting it. Example, the beginning scene of The Thing. Just hover over the dog and kill it, movie over. Actually, I like that movie, but hopefully you get the point. Story 54. Casually keep hide and then drink booze in the middle of their workplace like it's totally normal behavior. Most places would massively frown on drinking or getting drunk in the workplace, regardless of how bad the day was or whether it's after hours. Story 55. I have been waiting for years for this. People in movies pay the cab driver after they get out of the cab. This couldn't work in real life. I don't know if this still occurs in movies, but it did for decades. Story 56. When they know there's a killer outside, but they open the door and look left then right while slowly shrugging and turning to go back indoors slowly. Story 57. Getting the pounded out of you but still being able to fight back and chase the bad guy for another 3 to 5 miles. I wish my life had a great scene editor to make me look that. Story 58. Hacking. Everything to do with hacking, Swordfish and Jurassic Park come to mind, but it's always terrible not saying goodbye or hello on phone calls. This is more of a TV thing, but huge loft apartments in dense urban areas with no explanation how the financially struggling main characters are living there. Story 59. Having a gun battle in close quarters and then carrying on a conversation in a normal voice volume. That's impossible. Fire a gun a few times and your ears will be ringing for a while. Story 60. I have noticed that characters working on laptops immediately close them completely whenever someone comes into their office room. Does anyone do that? I can see where it might convey they're giving you full attention, but the person entering is interrupting whatever work is being done on that laptop. Closing the laptop slightly, or moving it to the side would work as well. It also can read as SUS, as if the person on the laptop must hide something. Story 61. People getting shot in the chest or abdomen and still being able to run and fight as if they weren't shot at all. Too, when people have a cardiac arrest in a movie or TV show, it's no CPR, no compressions, no rescue breaths. Just slap the paddles on them and kapow, shock, then flatline, then shock, then flatline, then shock, then they get a pulse, always on the third shock, and they're always being shocked in asystole flatlining, which is not a shockable rhythm. Plus 9/10 they survive and are just fine, compared to the single-digit survival rates you'd actually see. Story 62. When they tell someone that their loved one has died or killed yet they calmly interview them. Most people would be inconsolable and unable to talk. It would slow up the show, but some emotion is more credible. Story 63. Any reference to scuba divers breathing oxygen. Most of the time scuba divers just breathe compressed air with the same oxygen content you're breathing right now, Breathing oxygen under pressure is toxic to the central nervous system. Breathe it at depth and you'll go into convulsions and drown. Story 64. A bit of a different answer. I absolutely love horror, but a fair criticism from people is situation ABC in horror movie XYZ could only happen if the people in it are absolutely stupid or dumb AF. The trope of going into the dark basement when there's a killer on the loose never bothered me, but I can appreciate that some would hate that and challenge their suspension of disbelief. Cue COVID. The way I saw people, intelligent, well-traveled, highly educated people act during COVID showed me that people being stupid in a horror movie is not only normal. If the situation in question were real, I would expect it. If there were a killer in a house of teens, and there are bodies lying around, and one of the teens screams, "I saw the killer go into the basement, don't go down there," and one of the teens says, "I think you're overreacting, you'll go check the basement out," the theater viewer would groan with how unbelievable that is. And yet, I knew a nurse who refused to get the COVID vaccine. I knew people who wouldn't isolate when they or someone at home were sick, like WTF. So, yeah, horror movies used to kind of annoy me in that regard, but they ended up being more realistic I ever realized. Story 65. When I watch dubbed films, English is not my native language, and they translate the original literally, which means you hear the characters use expressions nobody ever uses in real life. Also, the inflections in the dubbed version sound really weird and unnatural. Story 66. When two young people are having for the first time, and they stand on opposite sides of the bedroom and slowly, awkwardly remove one piece of clothing at a time until they are completely naked. Literally, who does that? Story 67. Anytime they're rushing in a car to a building for something time-sensitive important, they stop the car like 50 yards from where they need to be and run the rest of the way. Makes no sense. Story 68. Any film with people driving from place to place in an urban setting where most of the 90 to 120 minutes isn't spent looking for a parking place. Yellowstone. Going from A to B in a car. Montana is big and A to B is a 3-hour drive. Yellowstone again. In 5 seasons did it ever snow in Montana? Rain. Story 69. Surviving an unsurvivable fire and having a full conversation as they escape. Unburnt, not a scratch or a blister. Nope. That superheated air would fry your lungs and your skin would be blistering and peeling off, buddy. Story 70. Having a full-on conversation in a loud bar or club that isn't yelling into somebody's ear. People have conversations in clubs at the same volume they would in a coffee shop. Story 71. I was just saying this last night. I hate when people are showering in a movie and they get out, barely dry themselves and then out clothes on. Maybe I'm crazy, but I fkn hate the feeling of clothes on my damp body. Story 72. Using tiny little two-way radios with stubby little antenna and having a crystal clear conversation with a person with similar radio on another part of the island. Story 73. How hair is basically never messed up. Like the main character could be battling a dragon, get thrown into a chasm, fall through a swarm of bees, and land in a tornado and their hair will still look like a Lego piece. Story 74. An audience attending an early concert of a future music star are able to tell that the musician is very talented and all listen quietly before clapping a lot. Story 75. You are in a TV show movie and you have one thing to say to your friend. Why call them when you can leave your house, get into your car, drive across the city, find a parking spot, take the elevator, knock on friend's door, say your piece, turn around and back down the elevator, find your car, drive home, settle back into your living room? Of course, you only see the 2 lines of dialogue part. Story 76. How all of a sudden the next scene is at night, even though not much time could have passed. Why, it was only early afternoon, they go somewhere near, action starts and all of a sudden it's pitch black night. Story 77. I always thought no one would just wait a fraction of a second after they rang the doorbell or knocked and say no one is there. There are people who do that. Just about 2 days ago I witnessed a housemate do exactly that. Knocked on the office door and immediately said no one was there. Story 78. Keys in the sun visor in every car. Picking up the phone and saying yeah, hanging up the phone without some kind of goodbye. Eating punches, throwing punches for days with no hand fractures. Inhuman stamina levels. Story 79. Fist fights that go on forever. A couple of years ago I fell while taking out the trash. Whacked my side on the corner of a concrete step. Felt like I was going to die for 2 months, but those actors in movies go on forever beating the out of each other. Story 80. It's a classic, but firing 100 shots from a 9mm handgun, needing to manually the gun multiple times to show you're serious. It's so stupid. John Wick set the standard for how it should be, and yet some films still ignore gun reality. Story 81. Middle of dinner. Cliffhanger. Then next morning they talk about it like they haven't spoken a word to each other since being halfway through dinner. They didn't talk at all after that. Story 82. Ignoring the fact that every computer for the last 40 years has used a mouse as its primary input device, they sit down and start tapping the keyboard. After precisely 2 seconds of tapping keys, the computer does exactly what they want, whether that's opening a photo, accessing security cameras, or repositioning a satellite. Story 83. When something happens and the character says something along the lines of "I'll explain when we get home," they get home and then explains the situation. So what did they talk about on the car ride home? Was it never broached at all? Story 84. Teachers always seem to walk into the classroom after the bell rings and the kids are already in the room, usually messing around, and then they teach until the bell rings and shout out the homework as the kids are leaving. As a teacher, this is rarely ever the case. Story 85. I work EMS. I've never sat a patient down on the back of our ambulance. gave them a blanket, a cup of coffee, and leave them alone, nor have I ever known anyone to do this in the field. One of three things will happen when you call for an ambulance or one is called for you. You refuse our services upon making contact, you let us check you out and then you don't go to the hospital, or you go to the hospital via the ambulance and receive treatments en route. A cup of coffee and a blanket aren't going to fix a broken arm. Story 86. Not closing the door behind them. When the camera follows the character and there's no dramaturgic reason for them to leave the door open behind them.